recording back on. Okay. And I'll keep letting people in as I see them.
Okay, should we
But
get
let's go ahead
started?
and get started. Yeah. So
Great.
I just want to say good evening and welcome everyone. This is our Fall into OBOB 2025 event series. Just a quick reminder, if you don't want to be on video, you can turn that off because we are recording it. And then I'll be sending the YouTube link to anyone so you can share it with your friends, your school, make sure if they, couldn't be here tonight. I love seeing faces that we've seen for both of our events so far this year. As you know, we're here talking tonight with Rebecca Steed for the Lost Library. A couple years ago, she was gracious enough to do this with the list of things that will not change, which I loved. So I just want to remind everyone to stay muted, put your questions in the chat if you have them while the author is talking, and then we're going to do a real quick talk about her book, and then we'll go to Q&A. So Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
So, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining this chat tonight. I really feel honored to have this time with you, and that's genuine. It is special that we, all decided to be together for the next half hour. And so I'm going to share some pictures just to let you know I am in a funny place. I'm on a writer's retreat. So once a year, I go away with 7 writer friends. One of them is from Oregon, guys. And she came all the way from Oregon. But we are in upstate New York, and we're at this funny, like old motel, and it does not have great Wi-Fi. So if I look a little fuzzy or things are a little draggy, I apologize. It's because I'm in my funny motel room, and during the day, I pretty much stay in here and try to work, and then in the evening we gather and talk about stuff that we plan to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can sort of introduce the Lost Library. Hopefully this is going to share. You can all see it. Somebody tell me if you can't. It's okay.
Good.
So great. Thank you. So what kind of book is this? So first of all, I'll start by saying Wendy and I decided to write The Lost Library in 2020, which some of you might remember was the first year of the pandemic. And we were wanting to write a story that we thought would be really fun to read, but we also both really like the idea of writing a book that is not just one kind of story. So, you know how there's like a ghost story or a mystery or an animal story, a family story, a friendship story, a coming of age story. We sort of had this idea that we wanted to write a book that was all of the above. And so in the story, as you're going to hear, um, the first thing that happens is that a little free library appears mysteriously in the middle of this town green. So there's a sort of green space in the middle of this small town. And overnight, without explanation,
Yay!
yay, a little free library appears there. And it is accompanied by this very large orange cat that you see on the book cover. And Evan, who is this kid on the cover, is the first person to encounter the little free library, and he doesn't know who put it there. He thinks it has kind of a funny smell of apples. And when he opens it, he grabs 2 books and soon discovers that one of them was a book that his own father took out many, many times when he was a child. And he soon thereafter realizes that all of the books in this little free library come from the old town library in their town, which is called Martinville. And that library burned down 20 years ago. So, how could these books be here in this little free library? And ever since then, they have been a town without a library. So the story unfolds, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, but I want to talk fast so we can have your questions. But as you just heard, the first scene is about a little free library. And in fact, the inspiration from this book really came from a love of little free libraries. These are little free libraries that Wendy encountered on a road trip with her kids. These arrows point to the first arrow on the left is a space where her daughter had just finished one of the Rick Riordan books and was dying for the second one. And then they encountered this little free library on this road trip across the country. And the next book that her daughter needed was in this little free library. And then she saw a little free library with one of my books, which is called Goodbye Stranger there. So she took a picture of that. And it was the first seed of the story, basically. She and her, that's Wendy and her daughter Chloe, sorry, who built a little free library together in their town. And then we had other inspirations, such as orange cats that we owned and loved well for many years, who were inspiration for the cat Mortimer. This is a picture of an old tree house that I used to walk by regularly on this woods walk that I like to take. And I sort of slowly watched this very dilapidated tree house fall apart over years of, storms and hot and cold weather. And this thing was falling apart, was completely unsafe. And one day it was gone. Somebody took it down. But as soon as I saw it, it was one of those things that I thought, someday I will put this in a book. These are some of the books that Wendy and I both loved as young people. Ugh, I don't know why all these windows are popping up. And Wendy, this is a pin from when Wendy was a library aide. And these all became inspirations for the story in The Lost Library. This is the story under construction. The way I write a story is I generate a lot of material and then I kind of make a book map. And so this is an example of one of my book maps. This is actually one of the book maps for The Lost Library. There's actually some things on this map which did not end up in the book. For instance, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little card that says the blackout. At one point, there was going to be a blackout in the story. But as the story was revised over months and months, that part of the story went away because we already have a lot going on in this book, okay? We have a significant cast of characters. Mortimer being the first narrator that we meet, and he is the guardian of the Little Free Library, and he is a cat who lives in a house with three ghosts. Two of the ghosts are librarians, one a head librarian who was the librarian in the library on the night it burned down 20 years ago. And one of the library's most loyal patrons is another ghost that he lives with. And the third one is a character named Al. And Al was an assistant librarian on the night the library burned. And they all live in this sort of historical house on the town green. So Al is, I'll talk about this in a second with the cover, but Al is sort of a mysterious figure. She takes care of the other two ghosts because she's the youngest one. So her job is to cook apples and potatoes to eat. She struggles being invisible. She's not a great flyer. Things are, she's not as skilled a ghost as her two roommates. And like Mortimer, she has a big secret. And then Evan is the fifth grader that I talked about. He's having mixed feelings about leaving his school. It's actually the last week of fifth grade. and he's going to graduate at the end of the week, and he has mixed feelings about going to middle school. He's not really sure that he wants to be a middle schooler, not just because he doesn't want to switch schools, and he doesn't, but he also has mixed feelings about just changing. I mean, when he looks at the eighth graders, he realizes that like they look different, their bodies are different, and he's not eager to change. And so he's trying to solve the mystery of why these books are in the Little Free Library, but at the same time, he's grappling with these feelings that he has. And in the end, it's one of those stories where everybody has a little bit of a piece of the other character's puzzles, and everything sort of fits together. And you I hope that by the end of it, all of your questions will be answered. But if not, I would love to hear from you because I always love to hear from readers. Um, I'm going to share for 1 minute about the cover because I think book covers are cool. These are the earliest sketches that we got for the cover, and we got to choose which one we thought would be best. So Wendy and I chose the one on the right, which does not look exactly like the cover that you're probably going to see if you um, read this book. The one you're going to see will look more like or just like the one on the right here, but covers evolve just like stories. So I was talking about the revision and making my book maps and deciding that we did not need a blackout in this story because there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And similarly, the artist who drew this cover went through different versions of her vision, and we gave her some feedback. Like you can see in the first cover on the left, the mice have cheese, but we asked if they could hold some of the clues from the story instead. And so she has them holding these other objects, a key and you know, the paper. What do you call that paper that's inside a library book? Anyone? Maybe you'll tell me maybe when we talk, if you know. And then finally, and we wanted Mortimer to look a little bit less cartoony and a little bit more realistic. And so she rendered him differently. And then the ghost house, which is the house that you see here, is getting progressively more ghostly if you look across the three versions. So I always like to share that because I myself am always curious about how book covers evolve. But I'm going to stop sharing now because I want to talk about whatever questions or ideas you guys might want to talk about. It could be about this book or something else, or your own experience writing. I'm sort of here for you, whatever it is that you feel like you want to know.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So it's always easier if you can type your question in the chat, just in case I don't see you raising your hand. But if you do want to ask your question out loud, use the raised hand function in Zoom, or you can raise your hand and I'll try and look through everybody's video screens. Yeah. Okay. It looks like Dia, you always have a question. Go for it.
Yay. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, what do you do when like you get a writer's block? Like you just get frustrated with your writing and you can't think of anything else.
What do I do? That is such a good question. That happens to me. It happens to every writer I know. Sometimes you just don't know what happens next. And one thing about the way I write is that I don't typically write with a plan. So some writers plan out their book and then they write it. Like they might even have a list of like, well, I know chapter one is going to be this and chapter two is going to be this. I don't write like that. I just write a bunch of scenes, invent characters, see how they act together, and then I revise for a really long time, which is why you saw that book map, because that's a key part of my revision. But even when I'm just writing without a plan, sometimes I just don't, because I don't have a map that I've made myself ahead of time, sometimes I do not know what comes next. And the best thing to do is to stop, take a break, and read something. Often I reread something that I know I loved and that kind of somehow, even though it has nothing to do with my book, reading a story I love kind of connects me with the essence of like what makes stories go. And I will start having little ideas, and then I can go back to my story.
And I also had another question. Where did you think of like writing this book? Like what made you write?
What made me? It's a little bit of, it's slightly complicated. Here's the short version. Wendy and I wrote a book called Bob together. We then wrote this kind of postscript, like a little bit of an extra story, for the end of the book, that eventually, it was at first only in some editions, and then I think it got incorporated into all the editions. But it involved Bob, who's this mystery creature, discovering little free libraries. And we actually first had the idea of writing a sequel to Bob that would be about a mystery that Bob has about involving a little free library somewhere. But our editors, because we had the same editors for both books, said, you know what, we love the idea of another book from you, but what if you came up with new characters instead of trying to revisit the character of Bob? And so then we came up with these different characters, and the idea that each character could kind of represent a genre in the way that a library holds many different kinds of stories. We have these narrators, and one of them is kind of telling a ghost story, one of them is investigating a mystery, and one of them is a cat, sort of an animal story. And then those stories work together. So the idea is that each storyteller is telling kind of a different kind of story. So we ended up going with that, but it took a while to figure it out.
Awesome. So we've got a couple of hands raised and a couple of questions in the chat.
Great.
I think I see a hand raised at Highland Elementary. Do you guys want to ask your question real quick? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's a really great book, but my question was, are you guys gonna write another one? Because like that last part, I sort of wanted to learn more at the ending about it.
Ooh, so you already read the book and you want more. Is that it?
Yeah.
So I have never written a sequel to any book. So I don't think there is going to be another book. I just want to say that I often have that feeling myself where I finish a book and I just wish there were a little bit more. Like I just want to know what happens next. And I completely understand that feeling. And in a way, I'm glad you feel that way because maybe it means that you enjoyed the story. But I also commiserate because I feel that way often myself, but I don't think there will be another one.
And then actually, before we let you go, we did have one other question.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I was wondering, I am in high school and I've written 2 books. None of them are published, but I wanted to know if you have any tips on how to publish them.
I mean, how to publish a book, my first piece of advice and what came first for me is to find some other people who are doing what you want to do. Find some people who are in your life, either, in real life or maybe in an online club of some kind, other people who are writing. Before I sold my first book, I worked on it for 2 years, just revising it. So I wrote the first draft. Sounds like you've done that. And then I spent 2 years revising it with other people who were doing the same thing. Now, these were not people who could get me a book deal, but they were people with whom I could improve my skills, basically, and learn to think differently about how a book is made and what makes a story really satisfying. I honestly believe the best thing to do at your age is to not rush, but to build the community that you need to, refine your skills so that when you do decide to start querying agents, which is where you write a letter to a literary agent. You have really spent a long time on your work and had a lot of time and freedom to experiment with your voice. What I don't like to suggest to people is that they rush to the stage of trying to get published, because I think it often can, if you find rejection at that point, it can discourage you before you ever should have put yourself to that test. And the community of writers that you build will not only improve your writing and your ways of thinking about writing a book, which is a really hard task, but they will also be there to support you through the ups and downs. So I have found that writer community is the best possible thing. And that's why I'm on a writing retreat with friends right now. Like, I'm not here with anybody official from publishing. I'm only here with other friends who are writing, because that is like the bedrock of my experience as a writer.
Thank you.
Great question. So I know we've got a couple of people who have had their hands up and who have had some questions in the chat. Libby, this might be the question that you had, but the question is, what is your favorite character? A couple people mentioned that Mortimer and Al are theirs.
Yeah. Let's see, between those are, I would say, actually, it's either Mortimer or Al. I mean, I love Evan, but there is something incredibly vulnerable and lovable about Al and Mortimer to me. Oh gosh, I don't know. I love them both. I'm going to go with Mortimer.
Excellent. Let's see here. I think there was a couple. I always love this question, and I feel like maybe we talked about this before, but it's always good. Did you like to read when you were a kid?
Yes. So I quickly flashed some books up there during my presentation, but we just didn't have time to go into them. But yes. So when I was a kid, I loved to read. I did not love to write, even a little bit. I was not into writing. That is something that came much, much later, after I had spent years and years and years in just consuming stories that other people wrote. I think that is, true of so many writers. And so if you are really passionate about reading, writing might be a path that you take. You may choose to take it or not take it, but it's not something that you should necessarily love doing right now. I think that for many years, almost through high school for me, my focus was on consuming other people's stories. And it was only at the end of high school that I began to think, maybe I want to write a story, something that had never appealed to me before that.
Excellent. Misha, I know you had your hand up. If you want to ask your question, go ahead.
Hi.
There you go.
I have two questions.
Great.
So first one was, what inspired you to write?
The main thing that inspires me to write is reading. If I stopped reading books, I would stop writing. I truly believe that.
My second question was, how long have you been writing?
I started my first book in 2001. So, or maybe 2002. So 23 or 24 years, a long time. But my first book came out, it took me probably 5 years to get that first book published. So I haven't been publishing books that long, but I've been working on books for almost 25 years.
Awesome. It sounds like maybe, was there another question from Highland Elementary? I feel like maybe somebody wanted to. Jessica, are you there? The joys of Zoom.
Should I be looking in the chat, or you're doing that,
Oh,
Julie?
I'm checking the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
you've
I
answered
just wanted
some
to
of
make
them.
sure I wasn't ignoring it.
No, and I think, okay, so here's two great ones. Here's two ones. Someone's asking what your favorite part of the book is, like a certain chapter, a certain scene. And then someone else did ask, what are some of the books that you go back and reread?
Ooh, those are good questions. So there is a scene that ended up kind of being my favorite scene in the book, and it is the scene. So Al, who's the assistant librarian ghost living in the ghost house, um, with her supervisor from the library. So I remember they were all in the library that burned down 20 years ago. The scene where they eventually say goodbye to each other for a reason that I can't tell you, if you haven't, because I don't want to spoil anything. But there's a scene where they say goodbye to each other, and that is my favorite scene in the book.
Excellent.
And then I'm sorry, what was the second
What
question?
what are some books that you go back and reread?
That's a really good question. Right now, the books that I reread are mostly books for adults. So one of them is a book by William Maxwell called So Long, See You Tomorrow. It's sort of a beautiful book, actually about childhood, but written for adults. And it's about a small town and a crime. And that is an example. I like to write books that are not too long. I don't like to write super wordy books, and that to me is an incredible lesson. That book is a lesson in how much you can do with not too many pages.
Yeah. It does look like we've got a couple hands up at the school, so we can do, I think, one or two more questions real quick. I just wanted to let everybody know who is interested in being a writer that we do have a local organization called the Central Oregon Writers Guild, and you can go to their meetings. They do silent writing groups where you can just hang out. You can have people read your stuff and kind of, exchange things. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you, Rebecca, maybe this is something you've also done. If you got to the end of the book and you think what happens next, you could try and write it. You
It's
could try
true.
and write that next chapter or what you think might be the sequel and the characters do. We call it fan fiction, but I think a
Mhm.
lot of people are really inspired by books that they read and then want to maybe try it themselves.
I actually remember doing that as a kid. With the book Fahrenheit 451. My junior high school teacher gave us the assignment of writing the next chapter after the last chapter. And it was one of the first times that I enjoyed writing in my life. And I often do say to people who want to write, but just aren't sure how to get started, like start with a book that you love and just write those. If you love some characters in that book, move them around for a while, have fun, with characters that you already love. That's a fun thing to do.
Yeah. I remember, so one of the books that you showed that were kind of your inspiration was Harriet the Spy. And
Yes.
for months afterwards, I carried around a little notepad and just wrote down things that I saw because I wanted to be a
Yes.
detective. So, like,
Yes.
what do you
That book
do when
is
you're,
so wonderful. I
yeah,
know.
I
That
love
book,
Harriet the Spy.
oh, amazing, amazing, amazing book. I
Yeah.
agree.
All right. Jessica, if you want to unmute, we have time for one or two more questions.
Okay, I think Lee, do you want to give it a go? Your hand was up first for that.
Out of all the books you've written, which one's your favorite?
That's such a hard question to answer. Honestly, I promise you, honestly, I do not have a favorite. Some of my books are somewhat close to my heart because they are sort of closer to my life experience. So I wrote a book called When You Reach Me that is sort of set. It's about a girl who's getting these notes that tell her she has to write a letter to save her friend's life. None of that happened to me, but many, many things about this character, Miranda's life, are taken directly from my life. So from my 6th grade year, from my neighborhood, my mom's apartment. My mom was on the $20,000 pyramid that year. So I had Miranda's mom be, the book opens where she finds out she's going to be on the game show. So I that is one of the books that is very, very close to my heart. And the other one is The List of Things That Will Not Change, which is also very close to my emotional experience as a kid. And so those are the 2 books that are probably like from the deepest places in my heart and my experience. But that's not exactly the same as being a favorite, because I also love the stories where I'm making up more.
All right, we can do one more question from Highland.
Yes, go for it.
Like, what inspired you to write the book that you wrote called Anything?
Ooh, that's a good question. So this year, my first picture book came out. It is called Anything, and it's a story about a father and a daughter who are moving. So when I was a kid, my parents, that's a very personal story. Because it's really based on something that happened when I was young. And that is that when I was a kid, my parents were divorced. So I often was moving with my dad. My mom never moved. She still lives in the same apartment where I grew up and where we moved in when I was 4 months old. But my dad, I know I'm 57, so that's 57 years. But my dad moved all the time. And so he and I were often packing and unpacking. And, moving can be hard and change is hard. And I was struggling one night, and I just remember him sort of carrying me and how it made me feel like I was at home. And I always wanted to write a picture book about it. And it finally happened. But that book came out this year, and I think I wrote the first draft 20 years ago. And then it some magically ended up in the hands of an amazing illustrator named Gracie Zhang. And so she, I think, really got the story. And so I love the way she did the art. So thanks for asking about that one. And I hope that you guys also still read picture books, even though I know that you're also reading novels, because one of the lessons of the Lost Library, in fact, is that great readers read books for all ages. And I think that, it's good to remember that as readers, we have our whole lives to read all kinds of things, but we don't necessarily have to like graduate from one category to another. We're allowed to take our love of reading all kinds of things with us throughout our lives. And so I hope that you will feel okay about doing that in your own lives, because I think that when I was young, I thought, oh, I don't want to read a book that seems young for me. But it took me a long time to realize that that's really not the way the pleasure of reading works. And it's important to feel entitled to read whatever book it is that you need to be reading at that time.
Excellent. So I know we could ask you questions for hours, and I wish we could get to everybody's, but we are going to have to wrap it up for tonight. Rebecca's on the East Coast, and we need to respect everyone's time. Here's what I do want to suggest to you guys. If you had more questions, especially related to the Lost Library and OBOB, if your teacher goes to Rebecca's website, then you guys could send a big email with everybody's questions. And you can also figure out maybe there's a time in the future where we could have her come and visit some of our local schools. So we love author events, but that's something we work out with the schools and with the author. So we can always look into that. So please, everyone, say thank you to Rebecca Steed for being here with us. We are so grateful you spent this time with us, and I will send everybody the recording. So if there was a question that you didn't hear the answer to, you can go back and watch it later. And I just wish everybody the best of luck with their OBOB competition this year. And we'll see you at this next week on the 14th for Elf, Dog, and Owlhead with MT Anderson.
Ooh,
I know, I'm
wow,
really excited
that
for
will
that
be
one too.
great. I want to come to that one. Yes, thank you you all so much for being here. And also just my email is on my website. So ask away.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, have a great night and keep reading and keep shopping at your local independent bookstore.
Yes, absolutely. Support your local indies. Good
Yes.
night.
All
Thank
right.
you
Thank
all
you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you.
you.